how much urgency is in your life? Is it fueling you or is it driving you crazy? Have you even ever stopped to think about how much of the time you are living in the urgent? And whether you have or are just now thinking about that question for the first time, is living in the urgent serving you? We're going to talk about undoing the urgency in your life and in your work today. But really, this episode is about a lot more than just that. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be with us live for future episodes on your favorite social channel. Just to get all the information about when we'll be live and all of those things so that you can interact with us and get these valuable insights sooner, you can join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective and a new set of tools to create great results for their organizations and team members. That's what Flexible Leadership provides you. Learn more and order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest. And there he is. Mr. Matt Reynolds is joining us. And let me introduce him to you, and then we are going to dive right on in. Ryan Matt Reynolds is a strength and conditioning coach, a former professional strongman. You can tell by looking that he's stronger than me. And the author of the new book, Undoing Urgency, Reclaim Your Time for the Things That Matter Most. He is the founder, owner, and CEO of Barbell Logic, one of the largest online strength and nutrition coaching companies in the world. With 25 years of experience in the industry, his focus is on redefining traditional personal training by creating connections in the online space and increasing access to professional coaches. Matt, that's a wonderful goal, and you have got other goals related to this book, and I'm glad to have you here to talk about some of those. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on.
It's a pleasure to have you.
By the way, I love you got all the little sticky notes, the Post-it notes in the book, which is, I like it. It means you actually read it. Yep. I saw those. That's great.
Well, that's what I do. If someone's going to be on this show, I will have read their book. Maybe not every single word, but
sure,
by and large, the largest percentage. So you open the book talking a little bit about your personal journey, and we don't need to go there. It's a useful and interesting context, but I really want to talk about your journey to the book.
Sure.
Like I've introduced you as a strength coach. I've introduced you in a lot of ways, and yet you've written this book about undoing urgency. So what's the journey to this book, and why this book, Matt?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm coming up on my 17th anniversary of being a business owner. And so nearly 2 decades at this point of being a business owner, I've just learned so many things. I'm one of these guys that is in a never-ending pursuit of knowledge, and I didn't go to school for business. I've got both my undergrad and my master's in education. I was a teacher in my early days. I love to teach, still get to teach. I just get to do it more in the private sector now, and so love it. But really, I think that there were so many lessons that have been learned over the years in business ownership, and many of those lessons were learned really out of the failures more than the successes. And so the successes are great, and we celebrate those. But if we don't learn from the failures, then I think we're destined to repeat those. And so I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and it was holding up a lot of bandwidth in my brain, taking up a lot of brain space. And so when Forbes approached me about writing a book, this is the topic that I wanted to write on, and it was really what I recognized as lessons I've learned over the past 2 decades of really. The book was written probably primarily for myself, as I'm preaching to myself in that I've been somebody who's drowned in urgency for many years, and I live my life hyper efficient. I get up super early in the morning. I get work done, and I've just been a workhorse for 2 decades or so. And yet, if I'm not careful, my entire calendar will become full, and that seems good, and it seems like I'm getting a lot accomplished. And really, what ends up happening is I spend all my time focused on the things that are less important and more urgent. And so for me, it was about when we were kids, if somebody asked my dad in the 80s, how's it going, or how you doing, which is the same question we ask today, the answer would often be good, good. And now if you ask anybody, how's it going, the answer is busy. And so we're drowning in busy, and we're drowning in urgency, and trying to get our head above water. And so this is really a book about that. It's not a time hack book. There are certainly very practical techniques that you can use that will help you here, but it's not really about the time hack. It's more about understanding core values and living a life in congruence with those core values, which is I want to spend the time in my life, as much time as possible, on the things that are the most important to me, which for me are, family and faith and health and fitness and being the CEO of my company, and not just working in the business, but working on the business. And so those things become very important. And so poured out everything I knew about it, and very, very proud of the book. The book's done very well here in the first few weeks of its launch. And so really excited about how we got there. And the process of writing the book, honestly, I hear a lot of people saying writing a book is one of the hardest things they've ever done. It was difficult. I think the second book I write, if there is a second book, will be more difficult. I think this was 20 years of things I had sort of pent up in my brain. And I've got a great editor-in-chief that works for me. We've worked together for 20 years, and so he knows my voice, and we worked together on the manuscript. And it was a really smooth process of writing the book. And then he's such a great copy editor that by the time we would send it off to Forbes, who's the publisher of the book, they would come back and say, "This is great. No changes to be made." And so I think they also loved it, that we had a great copy editor and someone who is excellent in their writing ability to be able to really tighten up my language and my lingo and the ideas in the book. And so it was a pretty smooth process. It was about a 6-month process from start to finish. But what it did for me is it allowed me to take all of those things that were sort of stuck in my brain and put them in writing so that I can pass them down to future generations of Reynolds, of my family and my community and my staff and the people that I've been able to connect with. And so that was a tremendous help for me. And so now it's allowed me to focus, to take some of that space that all of those things were taking up bandwidth in my brain, and focus more on the important things in my life. So even the writing of the book was, there's deadlines with turning in, I think we had to do 1/3 of the book, deadlines for every third. And so you meet those deadlines, you get it turned in, and then that is sort of off your plate and on to the next third. And then when you finally wrap up the book, you're like, okay, the book is done, and I'm proud of it, and this is great, and now I can focus on other important things in my life. And so that was really the journey of writing the book.
So obviously, if you're in business for 17 years and lived longer than that, there's lots of lessons that you've learned, lots of things that you could write about. And you said this was sort of a compilation of some of the most important things you learned. Why, of all the things it could be, right? I mean, you could have written about things you learned about coaching, or things you've learned
Sure.
about any number of other things. Why has overcoming urgency been so important for you personally?
Yeah, again, another great question. I think ultimately that the people who are most successful in the way we define success in the world, probably across the board, not just financially, but with happiness or joy in their life, are those who can really focus on the important things and move the ball down the field. I think many of us get stuck in the trenches of the urgent, and again, sort of drowning and trying to keep our head above water on a daily basis. And that might not just be work. It's often, it's kids' sports, and it's community, and it's church, and it's family, and it's all of the housework and all the things. And so those things are necessary. Some of those are important and urgent. Some of them are not important and urgent. Some of them are not important, not urgent at all. And so I think for me, understanding that when I looked at the most successful people in the world that I would try to model myself after, they have the ability to really focus and get stuff done. And for me, the focus had to be on the important things, not on the urgent things. The important things are the things that you think about, that is the legacy that you leave when you leave this earth, is the legacy that you leave to your children and grandchildren and great grandchildren and even those generations that you'll never meet. And so I want to focus on the important things. The important things are always drawn back to or connected to my core values. And so if I'm not living a life symbiotic of that, then I'm not really with my actions living a life that shows those core values. And so once I recognized what my core values were, I wanted to spend my time focused on those things and how to move the ball down the field. And I think, I've got great parents. They loved us well, but I was born the, poor son of a Baptist preacher and, raised in rural Arkansas for many years of my young life. And I think my parents have very much prepared us from a work ethic standpoint, education standpoint, to move the ball down the field as their children. And we've been able to do that. I want the same thing for my kids. And then I want the same thing for my grandkids and great grandkids. I don't have an ounce of jealousy in me for, I hope my kids surpass me. I hope my grandkids, and that doesn't mean they have to be CEOs or founders of companies, but to be able to do the things that bring them joy and move the ball down the field, I think is really important. And so for me, that was the greatest lesson learned. And those lessons, again, are often most learned in the failures and the places that I failed. And so, you mentioned this, but the book is very vulnerable and transparent, especially early on, talking about my own struggles with these things. And so certainly I've learned lessons from the celebrations and the mountaintops, but I think the lessons are better learned in the valleys and in the struggles. And so one of my favorite books I've ever read is a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, who is one of the founders of Andreessen Horowitz with Mark Andreessen, one of the biggest venture capital firms in the world. And he's been a very successful guy. Obviously, he owns one of the biggest venture capital firms in the world. But he tells a story of what it was like being a CEO as an operator on a day-to-day basis and how painful it is. It is extremely painful and it's extremely stressful. But the lessons are in those failures. The lessons are in the struggle. The lessons are in the hardships. And so this is my story of the hardships and the struggle and the lessons I've learned. And I hope that people are able to take some of those lessons that I've learned the hard way and not have to learn it in such a difficult manner. They don't have to go through the federal lawsuits or the things that I've been through that were very, very difficult in my life or struggles with my family or my marriage or whatever the thing is. And so there are lessons to be learned there. And when I was able to refocus my life on the things that matter most to me, on those core values, that's when I really started to see success. And so we went from, again, certainly from living well below the poverty level in the United States in the 80s to both my brother and I have built, like 8-figure businesses and, really bootstrapped from nothing. And so I think there are lessons to be learned there that I've been able to do that as an operator for the last 20 years. With those lessons learned, not everything is good. It's not always up and to the right. It's not linear. There's so many ups and downs. And so this is my story of those things. And I think that's incredibly important.
Everybody, I've read probably thousands. Well, I know, well more than 1,000 books. And I have never read a book that opens with a dedication to the author's grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So
who don't
that
currently exist, by the way.
Well, yeah,
who are not
I
born
gathered
yet.
that because I have a sense of how old your kids are.
Yep.
And so I share that with all of you listening because I think it connects to what Matt's saying, excuse me, about how this book, while it's about our time and dealing with things that are urgent in our lives, it's really, as I promised in the open, about something more than that. I want to get to several things before we finish, Matt, but I want to go back to the word that you used earlier. I put it, for those of you watching, I put it on the screen earlier, the word busy, which I have said, Matt, is with deference to my grandmother, I suppose, my dearly departed grandmother, that busy is the most dangerous 4-letter word in the English language.
Yeah.
And you said it, we used to say, how are you? We're good. And now we say, oh, I'm busy. And it ends up being dangerous in part because it gives everybody a pass.
Yep.
Oh, I'm busy too. Right. And it's an excuse as much as anything. And so because that is such an important concept for me to help people get past and try to get past myself, I think it's one of the reasons I like the book so much. But
Thank you.
again, there's more to the book than that, and it gets at some other really important things. There's about 3 or 4 things I'd like us to talk about briefly before we finish. And the first one may be the thing I will remember the most from the book, and that is the idea as humans in life, we will have hardships. Like
Sure.
no one's life is easy. Even if you look at someone's at a distance and it looks easy, we know it's
Probably
really
not.
not.
Sure.
And you know yours is not as you're listening. And yet you're suggesting, Matt, and I think rightly so, that we need hardships in our life. And in fact, we need a certain kind of hardships in our life. You want to talk about the idea of voluntary hardships for a minute?
Sure. Yeah. So the concept of voluntary hardship, first off, it comes back. I think you laid a great foundation there is that we know that hardships are going to come. Involuntary hardship is going to come in our life. And we don't know what that's going to look like or when it's going to hit, but there will be tragedy, there will be death, there are losses of jobs and lawsuits and divorces and whatever. And those things, that involuntary hardship is not guaranteed to refine. And we know this because, guys go to prison in voluntary hardship and they often don't come out better. Most of the time they come out worse. They could. You can come out better from involuntary hardship, but it is not guaranteed. And so I think one of the primary core values of myself and my company is that we choose hard things that no one else is going to make us do. That's something that you have to decide to do. As you mentioned, my background is in strength coaching and as a strength athlete, and no one, it's hard to put a heavy barbell on your back and squat. Nobody wants to do it. Some people like going to the gym and exercising and getting hot and sweaty and feeling good, but there is something about choosing the hardest things in the gym. The hardest thing, and certainly strength training is not the only voluntary hardship you can do. There's lots of voluntary hardships. Sometimes it's having the awkward conversation you need to have with a friend or family member or staff member or whatever, and often people run from those things. And I'm saying in the book we should run right towards them. When there are necessary voluntary hardships that prepare us physically, emotionally, mentally, socially for when the involuntary hardship comes, we've been refined by the voluntary hardship. We know how to handle it. We know the stress response that we get from it. We understand the cortisol dump that we may get from a hormone perspective. All of those things we can mimic in voluntary hardship so that when involuntary hardship comes, when the tragedy strikes, when somebody gets cancer, when someone dies, when you lose your job, when you get divorced, when whatever the thing is, and God forbid any of those things happen, but you are better prepared to handle it. And so I think in today's age where most of us sit at a desk all day and work often from home, including myself, there's not a lot of baked in hardship in our day-to-day life. And so one of the things I love to do as a side note, just like going on YouTube, is I love watching the lifestyle of people who live voluntarily hard, right? Like I've been watching a series of videos on people that live in northern Siberia, in the coldest city in the world, and what their life is like, and they've chosen to live there. They've chosen this life. And so when involuntary hardship strikes them, they're like, well, every day's hard. We work hard and do hard things all the time. And so whether that's putting a bar on your back and squatting the heaviest you've ever squatted, even though you're terrified of it, whether that's running the 5K or the half marathon you've never done, whether that's having the hard conversation, the awkward conversation that makes you better. By the way, every awkward conversation I've ever had has made the next awkward conversation a little easier. And so certainly I still hate confrontation and I don't enjoy those things at all, but there are times when those conversations are necessary. And so choosing voluntary hardship refines us and makes us better and better prepares us for involuntary hardship. And then I would say also prepares us in a way to greatly improve the chances of involuntary hardship also refining our lives. So when you live an easy life and you've sort of been handed everything, or you haven't really worked hard or taken yourself to a place that you didn't think you could go, or you were scared to go, or completely out of your comfort zone voluntarily, when it happens involuntarily, it often crushes you.
Yep. You're not
so
prepared.
That's why we do it.
So all of the conversations, and some of them have been on the show in the past 400 and some episodes about resilience or grit or these sorts of things, are
Yep.
all connected to this idea of what can we do to prepare ourselves for that better on purpose, right? Use wisely
Yep.
our power of choice in order to make that happen. There's a couple of of things that I think are directly related for us as leaders. And again, you're a business owner, you're a business operator, and you talk a lot in the book about challenges that you had with delegating,
Sure.
or really your unwilling, and at least at one point in time, your
Sure.
unwillingness
Yeah.
to delegate. And by the way, that is not, and you know this too, that is not an unusual story. It's an evergreen topic of need for us as leaders to work on, as being better at delegation. So Matt, what are one or two things that you've learned that you think are universally helpful
Yep.
for us as leaders to get better at the practice
Sure.
of delegation?
Yeah, that's great as well. And I think that often, our greatest attributes as entrepreneurs and founders are often can be our greatest downfall as well. And we know when we start a business that it's going to be hard. We understand. And but we don't really there is a superhero mentality that we have. I think, well, it was really hard for those guys, but I'll figure it out and I'll make it work and we'll be successful, right? And so in the beginning, when you're starting a new business, you are the owner, you're the manager, you're the technician, you're all of the things. One of my favorite books is The E-Myth that talks about these things. And you are probably better at every single job in your business than anyone else could be at that moment. But the business can't grow if you can't delegate, right? Just imagine if you think about the giant seven or whatever, the Facebooks or Metas and the Amazons and the Apples and the Nvidias and the Teslas. If that was an employee group of one, and all you had was the founder, those companies would be minuscule. And until you learn how to delegate and how to train up other people to do a job that you're doing, but you're maybe not specifically skilled at, that you cannot grow. This is the being able to free up your time to work on the business and not in the business. And so over time, I've hired, I've got our head of HR, we call a CXO, a chief experience officer, a COO, a CMO, a CFO. I did all those things in the early years, and I was better at them than anyone else was in my company. But you hire often on potential, and you train them up. And in the first few weeks, my experience is that they are often 75 or 80% of as effective as you are, which is pretty good. But now I can look at, especially my executive team, my C-suite, my leadership, they are all far better at their job than I ever was at their job. And so that's allowed me to free up to be a true CEO. And that term gets thrown around a lot. We're a Delaware C Corp where I'm an actual CEO where we've got 100 plus staff members, and I really have to be a CEO at this point. I can't be in the trenches constantly. I have to hire great people, train them up on their job, and then let them do great work, and really mostly stay out of their way and let them kind of report up to me and ask questions as they have challenges and struggles. And so that delegation piece, you just have to understand that there's a process there. If you hire somebody on day one and you expect them to be better than you, they won't be. No one is. It's your business. And no one is as deeply invested in it as you are. No one probably ever will be. And so yet, if the day's going to come, if you're wired to grow a business to a point of 7, 8, 9 figures plus, you have to be the type of person who understands how to delegate and how to train people and then give that away. And so I spent a lot of time writing systems and standard operating procedures, which no one really wants to do. That technical writing, I'm sure there are some weirdos out there that love it. I didn't, but I still did it. And that was my SOP, my standard operating procedure. And then when I hired somebody, I would give them that SOP and I'd say, this is your SOP. Now I want you to follow it step by step, exactly as I wrote it for the first few weeks. And over time, you'll start to see inefficiencies in my SOP because you have the potential to be better at your position than I am. And so that SOP becomes theirs. They have ownership in it. And so you're not treating them like an owner. They are an owner. And on top of that, we've also, and this is just as a side note, I think it's very important as a business owner, especially as a business grows, to be generous with equity with your great employees. And so that, again, they're not acting like an owner, but they actually have percentage ownership of the company. Right. So that they are actually invested in the growth of the company and the health of the company. And so That I have a team of A players, as my leadership team and executive team. I trust completely. I could go on vacation for 3 months at this point, and I'm sure they would all say, like, yeah, we need you to be here, but the company would do just fine for a quarter or more without me being there. And the goal there eventually is to have a business that's not entirely reliant upon you. If the business is relying upon you, and again, for some people, they may just want to own a mom and pop owned profitable business, make $100,000 a year plus. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. For me, I'm wired to grow the biggest business I possibly can. And if that is going to be the case or the scenario, I have to be able to delegate out to other great people and build a team of A players and then let them do what they do best, which is, so my COO he's incredible and is from the Pacific Northwest and comes from lean manufacturing and in sort of rocketry and airplanes and those like major multi-billion-dollar companies, and has applied lean manufacturing to online strength coaching, which no one's ever done. And so what we've been able to do is improve efficiency of our coaches dramatically. So the dollar per hour of our coaches have gone up 5 or 10x with no loss in service to the clients because he's great at what he does. Now, I'm not nearly as good of a COO as I am a CEO. My CXO, she's incredible with people. She's a people person. And so, I'm service-minded guy and I love people. And yet there are times that I see those emails come in and I think, man, if I were the head of CXO or HR, like I'd be firing back an email that's sort of mean and putting them in their place. And she just does it with grace and dignity and wisdom. And so all of these people are now better at their job than I could ever be at their job. They weren't on day one, but you have to trust them and trust your ability to hire great people. You hire great people. You put them in a place to succeed. You train them up to succeed, and then you let them go. You let them run. You let them run and get out of their way and do their job. And so, certainly we still have checks and balances. They report to the rest of the leadership team and the rest of the executive team and to me as a direct report. But for the most part, the answer is like, yes, everything's great. You're doing awesome. Keep, stay the course.
So I knew before we started, and we're talking with Ryan Matt Reynolds, the author of the book Undoing Urgency, and there's lots more I knew that we could talk about. We would not get to, but there's something at the end of and there's a whole, like, we really haven't even talked about sort of the big chunk of the book, which is about your game plan approach to goals and
Sure.
actions and metrics, etc. And so we're going to leave that for people to go buy a copy and get into all that sort of very practical and useful stuff about helping to move out of urgent and into important. But there's something at the end of the book that I know that you want to talk about and I wanted us to talk about as well. And it's sort of the ultimate purpose, I think, of
Sure.
everything we've talked about and everything in the book. And it's an insight that's worth us thinking about. And it's the difference between joy and happiness. And oftentimes people are trying to create happiness. Our Constitution says the pursuit of happiness.
Sure.
And yet you say, not so fast, Kevin.
Yep.
Maybe there's something we should think about differently there. You want to share with that real quick?
Sure. I think happiness is great. So the last thing I want to do is act as though happiness isn't, but happiness in my experience is fleeting. It's a feeling, it's an emotion that you have for a short period of time. And when life is good, you feel happy. And, if my wife got diagnosed with cancer tomorrow and certainly knock on wood that she doesn't, I won't be happy, but I can still have joy because I live a life that is founded in my core values. And so when we live a life that's again founded, synergistic, and congruent with our core values, we're playing the long game. Coming back to the beginning of the podcast, the reason that I dedicated the book to my grandchildren and great grandchildren and great great grandchildren is because I'm playing the long game. There are generations of Reynolds at some point, probably my great great grandchildren, who will not even know that they won't know my name. I don't know the names of my great great grandchildren or grandparents. I know the names of my great grandparents. I don't know or remember much about them. They died when I was really young. And I know my grandparents fairly well. And, but that is a moot point because when I'm playing the long game, what I'm trying to do is invest in the values of my family and myself and the things that really matter, and the values can be passed down from generation to generation. So while I couldn't care less if my great great grandchildren know that Matt Reynolds wrote a book, or even more, like, less importantly, I guess, was a CEO of this company called BarbaLogic. I hope that the values manifest itself to my children, and then to their children, and then to their children. And so when we do that, I think we often find we're playing a long game, and a long game is what really joy is attached to. So it's regardless of circumstance. And so I talk in the book some about the famous NBA players, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, who I'm both fans of, albeit men who have made mistakes certainly in their lives, as have we all. My perception is that Michael Jordan really just pursued the goal, that the goal, which was the NBA championship, was the thing that brought him happiness. But once he reached the goal and got the championship, there was a short period of celebration, and then it was on to the next goal, which is the next championship. Kobe seemed to find a way to find joy in the work itself, in the voluntary hardship. And I think that joy is often built not in the achievement of the goal, but in the pursuit of the goal. It is the thing we're aiming for when we're 80 or whatever the age is, and if we are who we say we want to be. If I'm the jacked old wise grandpa that's respected by others in different places in my life, that's great. But what really brings joy is the 60 years of work that went in before that, from 20 to 80. And so with the game plan, the goals, actions, metrics, etc., there's a goal we're trying to achieve. And the voluntary hardship and the work to get there is explained in the book as a means to the end. I think the joy is actually found in the pursuit itself, not in the accomplishment of the goal. And so when we recognize that joy is found in the work, joy is found in the pursuit, joy is found in those things, not in the once you've arrived, which I don't think anybody ever gets. Nobody ever makes so much money or is so successful that they're like, I've found, eternal joy in this. What really brings joy is the pursuit of those, a life focused on the pursuit that is, again, symbiotic or in congruence with your core values. And so for me, I differentiate between happiness and joy. Happy's great. Like, we just had we're recording this right after Christmas. We had a great Christmas holiday with my family. We're close to my family. It was a great few days, but then it's on to the next thing. And so for me, it's less about those individual moments of happiness that then pass, and it's on to January, and now we're first quarter for the business, and we're focused on those sorts of things. And it's more about the long-term pursuit, playing the long game, that brings joy ultimately. And so I don't want to pursue the goal at all costs, at the cost of joy or happiness, just to achieve the goal. But I recognize that the real joy is in the pursuit itself. And that's a tough lesson to teach, not just to your staff, but to your children. I mean, helping your kids understand that the work itself is not just a means to an end, but the work itself has incredible value in producing joy in your life long term. Those are the things we're trying to pass down.
And to tie it back to the beginning, everybody, you're not going to get there if you're living in the urgent. That
right.
is for sure. So a couple of things, Matt, before we finish, shifting gears, I'd like to know what it is outside of your work, and what are the other things that you do for fun, or what are other things? I'll just leave it there. What is it that
Sure.
you do for fun?
Yeah, I love to train. I still love to exercise. Again, I was a professional strongman and high-level powerlifter in my 20s and 30s. Now I'm in my late 40s, so I'm not going to hit the numbers I used to hit, and yet I still get a lot of enjoyment out of training and being healthy. I've noticed that all of those other things that bring me joy are downstream from that, and so it's not that fitness and training are the most important thing in my life, but practically I have to carve out that time every day in my schedule. I'm sweating right now because I just finished a workout about 30 minutes ago, and so I'm still sweating from it. And when I train and when I'm healthy, I'm a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a better business leader, I'm a better church leader. Like, those things are very important to me. And so certainly the other things that are extremely important to me is family, which I think for those of you listening who have family, I would hope that that's towards the top of your list, like good quality time with my family. investing in my family. We've had tremendous conversations around the dinner table. We're very intentional about eating dinner together at the actual dining room, cooking meals together, and having great conversations about culture or politics or religion or whatever, the type of stuff that I stay away from on a practical basis on podcasts, but that are great to talk to your kids about. And so to pass down those values, those things become very important. My faith is super important to me. I'm a leader in my church, and your core values don't have to be the same thing as my core values. That's fine. And as a matter of fact, we talk through this in the book. I give examples of what mine are. But I think living a life that is focused on where the majority of your time is spent on the most important things is really important. And then again, as a CEO of my business, I want to do the things that only a CEO can do. And so if I'm drowning in the urgency of the in the trenches work, which is easy to do as a CEO, then I'm not really doing the things that only a CEO can do. And so figuring out how to delegate well, how to have executive assistants, and we do the same thing even at home, having someone to mow my lawn or a housekeeper to come keep the house on whatever regular interval that is that you can afford. I think those things are important because it frees up that time for you. I'm not too good to clean toilets and baseboards and floors, but if I can hire somebody else as a relatively successful CEO, then I can take that time and I can focus it on the things that are more important, which may be time with my family, time in my spiritual disciplines, health, fitness, exercise, and then, of course, working as a CEO and vision casting and thinking about the future. I mean, here we are at the beginning of the year of 2025, and we're thinking about what are our goals, actions, metrics, execution of everything we want to accomplish in the business for 2025. And again, if I'm just trying to keep my head above water and make payroll, then I don't ever get to do that. And so it's imperative that I focus on the things that are most important to me. And so those are the big four, I think, for me. And for others, they're going to have other things. I mean, there's people listening to this that they're not married, they don't have kids, they don't have family, maybe they're not religious in any way. But you will recognize, and I think what the book does, it starts at that kind of 30,000 foot view, helps you to identify the things that are really important to you from a core value perspective, and then start to lay out goals in that game plan, the goals that will help you reach the places you want to go on the things that are really most important. And then the actions just support those goals. The metrics are how we measure. The execution is the day-to-day task list of what we do to make sure we're moving the ball down the field. And so when my task list is 35 things long and I look at it and 30 of the 35 are not important, they're just urgent, then I know everything's out of whack. And so just having your calendar, one of the chapters in the book is called your calendar is a truth teller. And it's a truth teller because we can look at our calendars and see, like, people can say what's important to them, but then we can look at your calendar, if you use Google Calendar or whatever the thing is, and we can see where your time is being filled. If your time is being filled on things that are actually urgent and not important, then you're not really doing the thing that you said you were going to do, or that the life that you want to lead. And so no one will remember the urgent work that I do. And this really comes from Eisenhower. He said, I have two types of problems: urgent problems and important problems. The urgent are never important, and the important are almost never urgent. His goal was to free himself up from the urgent so he could focus on the important. And that's what we're trying to do, I think, as business owners, as founders, as successful business leaders, as husbands, as fathers, moms, wives, community leaders, church leaders, whatever that thing is. I think those things, that's what we're trying to focus on.
I know because we talked before, and I know because I've read the book, and you've mentioned several books. Give us one more book, maybe something you've read recently, or just one thing that beyond your own. We'll talk about
Sure.
that a little bit more in one sec. One more book that you might recommend to others.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite books I've read this year is it's a book called Never Enough by Andrew Wilkinson, and he's a multi-billionaire at this point. He started as a barista, and it's that concept of exactly what the title of the book, Never Enough. There's always this pursuit of the next goal. Can I make more money? If I'm a millionaire, can I become a 10 millionaire, and 100 millionaire, or a billionaire, or whatever the thing is? And it was this, he felt like he was stuck in a rat race to try to constantly accomplish this goal, when he recognized again that the value was actually in the pursuit, was in the work, and to enjoy the work that he did. He gained a tremendous amount of calm. The anxiety goes away. You start to realize, like, I'm doing the thing I love. Like, this life that I I became very addicted or obsessed with fitness and training and lifting weights when I was 18 or 19 years old. My parents thought this is just a sort of a ridiculous phase that he's in as a hobby. And of course, as that's turned into an 8-figure business, mom and dad have become much more much more proponents of what I do, and so I get to do the thing I love. But the thing I love now, while I still love to train and I still love to coach, the real challenge for me that I love more than anything else is actually in being a leader in the company. It's being the CEO and trying to lead well and be a great leader. And so I read a ton of biographies about great leaders and learn from them, learn from their mistakes, learn from where they did well. But the book Never Enough from Andrew Wilkinson is an excellent book. If you feel like you just can't ever not just get your head above water out of the urgency, but no matter how much you are able to accomplish, it's never enough, and there's always a pursuit for more. This is a great book to read. So if you're struggling to think like I'm never satisfied with the accomplishments, this is a great book. And it's really, I think, comes back to that idea of finding joy in the work itself, not in just the accomplishment of the goal. Was very cathartic for me to read, just like the hard thing about hard things was. I love reading books about people and their struggles because I want to read books, especially for people who have gone through similar struggles than as I have, and come out on the other side and learn lessons from those things. I don't want to have to learn those same hard lessons he did. So in the same way that I hope people learn lessons from my book, and which is probably more for the up and coming business owner, for those who are in their first 5 years of business ownership, I've had a ton of stay-at-home moms reach out and write reviews for Amazon and say this is great. Like their lives are drowning in urgency, and the schoolwork and the sports for the kids and the keeping the house and all those sort of things. Whatever that thing is, I think there are lessons to be learned there. And so for me, I love to read books where people they get it, they understand me, and while he doesn't know me from Adam, I can read about his struggles and say I've been right there, and say okay, there are lessons to be learned here that I don't have to learn as hard as he did. I can take and learn. This is what's so great about books. I mean, you have these people who have accomplished so much, and they take their entire life story and they put it in 250 pages, and within 2, 3, 4 days, you can read the entire thing and take and glean all of this information from a life of work. Like this is what I love about reading and being in a never-ending pursuit of knowledge. And so, yeah, I love that book from Andrew Wilkinson.
We will have links to all those books that we've mentioned in the show notes, as well as a link to Matt's book. The title of the book is Undoing Urgency. For purposes of being an author, long story, you will see that's by Ryan Matt Reynolds. You know that you can call him Matt. We've been calling him Matt all day. Where can people learn more about the book, and where do you want to point people real quickly before we wrap up?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is ryanmattreynolds.com. It talks all about me in the book. Certainly, Amazon is sort of king of the rankings at this point. So getting the book on Amazon is great. There's a great Amazon author page there that you'll find on Amazon if you just search Undoing Urgency as well. And then if you're interested in strength coaching, my company is Barbell Logic. You can go to barbelllogic.com. You can follow Barbell Logic on social media. They're Barbell Logic everywhere. Or follow me personally on social media at Reynolds Strong on all the social medias, Instagram and X and LinkedIn and all that stuff. And so would love to hear from you, especially if you get the book. Love some feedback. If you get the book and read the book, would love a review, honest review, not just asking for 5-star reviews, but honest review would be excellent. So ryanmattreynolds.com is probably the best place to go, and you can fan out from there.
ryanmattreynolds.com. So before we go, everybody, and before I thank Matt for being here, the question that I ask all of you every single episode, and none of this matters in the last 40 some minutes if you haven't thought about this question. And the question is now what? What action will you take as a result of being here? Because if you don't, what's the point? I mean, hopefully you found this entertaining and engaging and interesting, but it won't change anything unless you decide to do something. And so we hope that you will take action, not just in terms of buying a book, which we hope you do, but also what ideas did you take from this that you will apply immediately? Because it's when you do that your life and your work will begin to change. Hope you'll do that. Matt, thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to have had you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
And everybody, if you enjoyed this, make sure that you like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Make sure to share it with someone else so that they can join us too. And because we're here every week, and I hope you'll be back with me next week for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.